Welcome back everyone. Today we're going to do a video on our 94 Acura NSX sitting beside me here. And before I go into what that video content is going to be about, I want to go over from head to toe everything that is wrong with this car. Some we knew and some we didn't know. So let's go ahead and start at the front of the car here. So when we got the car, there was knowledge, I will say, that the car had been extremely low. And so low, in fact, that there's a few plastic pieces that decided to depart the vehicle at some point. And so we had to source new plastic pieces. And luckily, we were able to source those for a fairly low price and resolve that. So all the wheel liners are now back into this car, and all the little plastic pieces and connectors that go to those pieces are in place. Um, in addition to that, because somebody lowered the car, like I said, they hit one of the down pipes coming off of the exhaust manifolds, the one that goes underneath the oil pan and out the back of the car. So hard, in fact, that it actually dented it, and we'll put some pictures up here of what that looked like. But it was so hard that it actually crushed in that pipe about probably halfway, if not a little bit more. So definitely an exhaust restriction there that we were glad to have a spare part and replace that. That was supplied by the dealership. They just didn't go through the process of actually having it installed. Something about missing gaskets or unable to find gaskets for it. Luckily, we have all the gaskets here because they're pretty interchangeable between these cars. Another thing that we ran into was on the AC. We did not know this, and neither apparently did the dealership, come to find out that the AC charge had evacuated at some point during the time that they had this car in their possession, because they assured me that it actually was working when they got it, but had sat so long that it kind of discharged itself, supposedly. Really easy to remedy. We went ahead and put a charge on that, and it's been holding fine ever since. Some things inside the car that we weren't necessarily aware of, some broken plastic pieces and things like that. Pretty common on these cars due to their age and just the time in which they were built. Plastic pieces weren't really, um, you know, designed and built for long duration, and so we've done some repairs on that. Got the windshield washer sprayers working again. They were clogged, so easy to resolve that issue. And for the most part, there's not a lot wrong with this car, but there is one major thing that we are going to do a video on today, which is the motor mounts on this car. This car has 4 motor mounts on all 4 corners of the engine, and unfortunately, at least 3 of them that I can see clearly are either torn or ripped in some fashion, and it's leading to a lot of vibrations, and we're going to go ahead and show you how to replace those motor mounts in this video. A few of the other things that we've gone ahead and taken care of were not necessarily any faults, but probably a lack of part availability at the time, which was some fuel lines had obviously had a leak at some point, and so they put a patch in, and we went ahead and just replaced it because we were able to source OEM parts. We've done general maintenance on this car. I'll show some footage of the fuel filter replacement and how much dirt was actually in there. So I've done a lot of fuel filters in my time on vintage Acuras and Hondas, both deferred and maintained. And out of all the deferred maintenance cars I have ever done, I have never seen fuel come out of a fuel filter looking like that before. That was what was inside. This is just mud. It's literally mud coming out of that fuel filter. We just did a whole refresh of new fluids just to make sure that this car is going to run smoothly during our possession, and obviously mitigate any future issues through the degradation of those fluids. So fairly simple work here, not a lot honestly, and it just needs a little bit of restoration touch to bring it up to my quality standards. But on top of that, the only other thing that's wrong with this car that we're aware of is that when we drive it out for a short period of time, and I mean literally from this position to outside to maybe wash it, and then try to restart it, for whatever reason, it just doesn't want to fire again. So we're chasing down whether it's an ignition issue or possibly a fuel supply or delivery issue. We were hoping with that new fuel filter that we installed that that would resolve it, but it seems to still be an issue, and so we're tracking that down. But no worries, there's a couple low-hanging fruit in the community that we're going to investigate, and we've got some parts on order just to see if it might be a part-related issue. Some parts are testing bad, and that could just be either our equipment or the fact that they are truly bad. So we'll go ahead and troubleshoot that, but that's not a big issue. It only happens sporadically, and it always refires, so not an issue. But let's go ahead and get into the video content today about replacing the motor mounts on this car and showing you how to do it in your garage with just basic jacks and hand tools. So let's go ahead and get into the video. So we've got our 4 motor mounts here. There's one that goes on the back, the front, if I remember correctly, and then this is the transmission one, and then this is the right one. And this one we're actually going to do a Science of Speed upgrade because that one takes a lot of the vibration out, and stiffening this is going to help a lot with that. These ones right here are just OEM replacements off of a really low mileage NSX, and so this is going to work out well for us as far as saving some money. Now these mounts, even at their extreme low mileage of about 40,000 miles, do start to show signs of cracking, at least this one right here, and this is the front one. This is showing just the hair of a start in the crack of the side here. So even at that low mileage, you can see how prevalent of an issue this is. So let's go ahead and get into replacing these by jacking up the car and getting underneath it. So focusing on the underneath mounts, the two, one in the rear and one in the front of the car up there, we have to obviously gain access to some of these. In the front, it's a little bit more challenging than the rear. You likely can navigate this one out without doing anything, but you got to remove the support brace that goes around to get the front out. So what we're going to do right now is assess what needs to be removed, and then obviously start to remove those bolts so we can gain access to the front. So on this side, you want to use a 17 millimeter socket and a wrench on the other side of the same size to remove this. You also want to use a 14 millimeter socket to remove the bolts that attach it to the engine. This is the rear mount, and you can access this fairly simply without moving any crossbar. So if this is your sole problem, this one's really easy to do. For the front mount located here, we're going to go ahead and try to remove this without necessarily removing the crossbar here. Instructions say that you should be removing these components to access this one mount. Now, I'm not quite confident that that is the route that we have to take, as I've noted that there's room at least around here. But if we end up failing, everything here has to be removed as well as the shift linkage. So we're going to go ahead and try to remove this without removing the subframe. All right, we went ahead and installed this. This was fairly simple. Just like I said, undo this and those 3 bolts, and you can put everything real easy into alignment. A little pro tip here, make sure that you go ahead and install this one first. Keep it loose while you go ahead and do these. Once you tighten those up, then you can tighten this one up. This will make sure that this mount is in alignment with those holes and you don't run the risk of stripping them out. So I did find out that you kind of do have to remove this bar to get to the mount and that sub cross beam that goes across. And the reason being is that you really just can't get enough leverage on that bolt that goes through the motor mount to latch it into place on the frame. So I tried and I felt like I was getting somewhere, but then I felt like I just didn't have enough leverage and strength to get that bolt loose. So it really does just warrant to remove these. If you've got an impact gun, you can do it in like 5 minutes. I struggled for almost 30 minutes before I realized, let me just zip this off. Obviously this has to be cleaned up a little bit, but we'll do that and then we'll get underneath. So let's show you what it looks like underneath right now. We've got the beam or the support structure removed, and now we've got just this beam that needs to be removed, and the only thing holding it in is the 2 bolts, one on either side, and then obviously the motor mount. So what I'm going to do now is let's roll underneath, and I'm going to remove these bolts right here, which will then detach it from the motor. Obviously, we want some support under there, so I'll do that first, but that's how we've got to go about it. All right, we got the crossbeam all set, cleaned it up a little bit, and we went ahead and put the new mount in. So when you're putting the mount in, this is locked in place, and that's why you can't use any wrenches on that, because it just is going to spin off. I didn't know that at the time, but it is definitely locked in over here. So the only access you have is to this bolt over here. That's where you need to put all your torque on it. Now, putting it back in ought to be interesting, and the reason why I say that is because this wants to move up and down as you're trying to put it in place, and you don't want to torque it down yet because you don't know how this is going to line up with the holes on the back of the block. So we've got that all set up, and it's like pretty firm, so that I should only have to put a couple wrench turns into that, and hopefully we can get that torqued down properly. Everything is pretty good, ready to go back in, so we're going to flip this over and then put it back into the car. Okay, pretty much everything is easy to reinstall once you have it back up. So what I did was I went ahead and put these bolts in on each side, the ones that don't support the frame that goes to the back of the car. So this will hold up this cross member right here, which will allow you to get in there and with a wrench, tighten it up to spec, and also tighten these bolts up that hold it to the block pretty easily. And so then all you have to do from there is tighten up those and then put your structural frame back in that goes to the back, and then you can tighten up these nuts and bolts right here. Everything else is pretty straightforward, and the only trick I can give you on, or tip and trick I can give you on this one, is let this hang down a little bit and just hand thread in like 2 bolts, because the gasket uses the bolts to stay in place. So once you got that, you can hang it and then use like a pick to put all the rest of the gasket in place one by one, and then it'll suck right back up and your gasket will be nice and sealed up for this little part right here. Obviously this is an automatic transmission, so the manual is going to look a little different, but that's pretty much easy to do right there. It's just making sure you put this back in the member and then putting your cable onto your bracket. Pretty easy. All in all, I think this job took me maybe hour and a half. I probably took a little bit longer to clean up some oil. Other than that, it's good to go. Okay, we're going to start by removing the alternator belt guard here. Going to allow us access to the belt, and then we're going to loosen the 10 millimeter that holds the belt or the alternator in place. Okay, and then we're going to loosen up the back bolts here. And we're going to loosen up the front locking nut. Okay, we've got the alternator slightly loosened. We're going to go ahead and loosen it a little bit more. This will allow us to now slide the belt off. You may have to continue loosening it a little bit more to get it to fully come off here. All right, with the belt off, and now you've got the 2 bolts and then this bolt over here, you should be able to start removing your mount and then swing this up out of your way. So we're going to go ahead and do that next. So to get this part out, we actually had to hold these nuts on one side of it while we tried to spin off the bolts. So these are the bolts that go right here, and you can see there's a nut on one side and there's a bolt on the other side. And here is another nut and bolt combination right there. So a little tricky because you have to put your hand under there, obviously, to get to those locations. The main one here is pretty easy. It's this big guy right here. So we're looking at a couple 14s and a 16 for the big part. And it's pretty straightforward, honestly. We'll go ahead and have this job squared away here in just a few minutes. All right, so if we compare our OEM one here, you can see there's a clear crack all the way through, and it actually carries all the way through to the other side, and it's starting to crack right at the bottom there. So definitely has lived past its life, and we've got the new Science of Speed one that we're going to install here, and it's pretty straightforward, I would say. Just have to basically undo these mounts in these 3 locations, move that alternator out of the way like you saw, and then we get ready to drop this one back in the car. So let's go ahead and do that. And to get to this point, it was pretty easy. You're able to snake it in underneath the alternator and then back it into its mounting location. Go ahead and drop your pin in here to keep it from moving around while you go ahead and secure these 2 bolts and their bottom nuts. Now, I didn't have to remove anything, which means I didn't have to disconnect the battery, which then saves you a bunch of time and effort trying to reprogram everything in your car. Now, if you were cautious, you could go ahead and remove everything, but it was easy for me not to do that. I just lifted this up out of the way, and now we're going to go ahead and put that back together. So you can see here, easy to install the Science of Speed mount here. Looks great. And it's going to take care of that issue that we had probably with those vibrations. So excited to see how this turns out. If anything, it's definitely going to make the engine more secure in that location. Well, we're starting to wrap this up. We went ahead and put the alternator belt back on and have it tensioned. Now, a little pro tip here. I usually put a little bit of paint marking down there before I disassemble everything. That way I can put it back the way it was without having to guess whether I've got the right tension or not. If it was the same belt and the tension was right before I began, this will likely lead to the belt being correct after I go ahead and complete the work. So it's a quick way to just get it dialed in, and then you're good to go. The paint, if you're really concerned about it, it will wear off as time goes on. You can certainly, screw it in a couple times and screw it out, and it'll clean the threads up if that's a concern of yours. Overall, though, this job I would say is probably like a 1 or a 2 out of the whole effort scale of a 1 to 10. It's certainly something that takes maybe about 30 minutes to do, and then you're all set. You've got this nice mount, and you got everything reassembled without having to take all that apart. I'm going to go ahead and put the belt cover on and then fasten this wire harness back to its location, and that'll do it for this video, and we'll see you on the next one.